Oh yeah, so I'm a firm believer in the effect of like trauma on the outcomes, right? Like talking about lifestyle, right? Like if I drink too much while I'm working on a very stressful like art piece that I've given myself a time crunch for, and my relationship is falling apart, I just happen to get like psoriasis at that time, which is kind of an interesting coincidence. And I find that like like I drank a few beers last night, right? So you got the gluten, which has probably reached its like level of tolerance over the last 40 years in my body
Hmm.
because I've ingested so much of it. My body's just like fuck off with the gluten already. Um, well, inflammation, right?
Hmm.
All of these inflammatory things uh, I think it's like a healing crisis just coming to the surface. And then when I do behave negatively towards myself, it manifests. So it's like I'm really thirsty today. I'm drinking lots of water and stuff because I was drinking last night. It's like a very quick cycle for me, and it's interesting that like nobody talks about just that as the root of a lot of health issues. I guess that was my point. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there, but basically, like I'm not a doctor, but I know that this is stress,
Yeah.
and it's the way I treat myself, and I don't think pills or like topical steroids might help the way a makeover might help your self-esteem, but it's not a solution.
Hmm.
It's coffee for breakfast. Like yeah, you've got 2 hours to find some actual carbohydrates.
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I think
so
that ties in really well with what we were talking about with comorbidities and COVID, where
yeah,
rather than rather than saying, okay, guys, maybe we need to look at our society and come up with a broad scale change that actually addresses the way that we interpret health and the way that we interpret diets and exercise and being outside and being social.
yeah.
Instead, I'm not even sure where that conversation went, but it definitely went by the wayside.
Well,
I've seen the occasional professional athlete, and not even big professional athlete, but guys that I used to play volleyball with. They'll share the occasional comorbidity statistic and say, these are the things that we need to be addressing. And it's high sugar diets, smoking, morbid obesity, and none of these things have entered the domain of conversation during this during this whole thing. And
oh no, you're not allowed to talk about it, and like I'm not even allowed to make a comparison to how many people died of cancer every year preceding the last 2 years. How many people and the flu?
mhm,
Like people were dying of the flu, and now the flu is gone because that's how viruses kind of work, right? Like they evolve over time. I feel like I don't want to get too spiritual because I sound like a wingnut hippie that's like refuses blood transfusions and medical science. But
yeah,
like to a large extent, viruses are coming out of our environment. Like it's not a coincidence that the population density and density of pollution are producing the highest amount of cases and deaths,
mhm,
right? So and again, it's that viral load too, right? Where it's like how much of it is attacking your body at once? Like how are you, is it able to? And yeah, I'm not an expert. I'm not a virologist, so I don't claim to be. And I find myself getting into the realm of storytelling and like talking about the body fighting off a disease, because that's what I was told in school. Is that it's like this soldier comes in and then the body like fights it off with antibodies and
right.
all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, I mean that's sort of true, but like, yeah. What's interesting about what you said earlier, though, is that like you're still framing it in terms of like what we should be forcing people to do. Like that's our mentality is like yeah, we should be forcing people to jog and have good health. It's like, well, no, I think that liberty tends to beat most systems.
I'm not sure if I'd say we need to be doing
No,
those
but
things.
like I just mean like in terms of how we think about it.
Hmm.
We think about
Right.
it in terms of control and
Yeah.
only control. When the reality is we should be focusing on what you can do for yourself and the people in your life, and then if we radiate from a foundation of that peace and balance, you're gonna create a a sustainable change. because it's not coming from any kind of authoritarian position. And save the authoritarianism for murderers and rapists, right?
I agree with that. I think that there's a I do think that there's a little bit of a, maybe you could say it's a righteous proclivity for people that are in that subgroup of being the healthy ones, where they're saying, okay, I've kind of dealt with my thing, so maybe you guys should deal with your thing so that we can all move on. But then at the same time, I think that there's a righteous counterculture from the people that are within those healthy subgroups saying, well, who are you to say, who are you to imply that maybe I shouldn't be 600 pounds and smoking a pack of cigarettes a
Well,
day,
and then,
which is totally
yeah.
reasonable.
So, yeah, no, the way to deal with that is just let them do what they want and don't help them if you don't want to help them.
Mm-hmm.
But when we create systems where everybody has to, whether they consent to it or not, participate, you end up with like control, right? And like, I mean, politics is just about unionizing political force, right? Like, so if you get, the best way to get voted into something is to convince people that can't necessarily get anything done on their own. I don't want to sound like a capitalist pig, but like basically less productive people coming together to force resources to be redistributed from something that is more productive. Now that's pretty abstract, and it doesn't really account for the accumulation of wealth over time or the exploitation and stuff. But the bottom line is that political unions are about unionizing force of many against minorities of people with more resources, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and again, that's just like, that's the rhetoric that we get is about forcing people to do stuff. Like, yeah, like it's a better, you're going to get more consumption out of somebody that's overweight and smoking if you tell them that what they're doing is fine, and the people that are like opposing that are wrong. And then on top of that, we have like a healthcare system. You're in the States, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously it's a different situation, but like you're by no means a completely free market. Like I don't even know what the States is a bit of a mess in terms of the
Well,
healthcare.
I'm
Like it's a
from
mess up
Canada.
here. Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
you have an understanding of like,
Yeah.
but like they act as though it's like, the media tells me that the American system is completely like libertarian, like some sort of hellscape, and I'm like, well, that's not true, because they have hospitals which wouldn't exist in your, like, how did they get built, and if people come into there for just emergency things, they do get treated. They don't turn patients away. So I'm not sure, like, it's some weird hybrid which doesn't work. And Canada, I don't know, Canada's, if I have to pay taxes to have the healthcare system and then they shut down all the hospitals because of a scary virus, then I want my money back, because I'm not using the service that I was forced to pay for. And so this is when you run into trouble, though, with like systems that force people to participate. Now, I don't call myself a libertarian. Like I said, I'm about 2/3 of that. I do think we live in a society, and you do need some sort of cooperation.
Yeah, you gotta.
My point is that, like, if you examine this in terms of like the sort of the game theory of getting control of that unionized force, and you don't think of these political actions, like the rhetoric in terms of like what's right or wrong, or even the best for society. It's about getting that power and selling product. It's a lot easier to understand why people are put into groups and attack each other, because you can always pay one half of the poor to to kill the other, right? So, I mean, and that's, I don't know. Am I off on a tangent?
No. Okay, so I'm thinking about, I've been thinking about this for a while, in that, so the American healthcare system, I would say, is far better than any other healthcare system in terms of quality. If I need something, I don't have to, if I need a surgery, I don't have to
You
wait
wouldn't.
6 months.
Yeah.
I can get into a doctor as long as I'm insured. And that's another thing that you have to think about in these systems, is that the cost of insurance should be hopefully accessible to people, and hopefully healthcare becomes a a human right. And at the same time, if you go into a global healthcare, so something like Canada, then I would say that maybe there's a small portion of people that are the majority of the weight in that healthcare system. And by that measure, then you have a bunch of people that are actually taking care of themselves. And you, even if we were to frame this let's frame this from an economic perspective. If you have a bunch of people that are taking care of themselves, they're actually investing in their own health and in their life. And then they also have to invest back into the healthcare system, which they're not going to use because they're investing in themselves. So they're doubling up on an investment. And then there are people that are generally less healthy, that you could also say that those people are actively investing in their reduction of health or dishealth. So say you have an alcoholic that over time they have to get their liver replaced or something like that. Not trying to yell at you or anything.
No. I'm functional anyway, so it's like I started a new project, so it's like I hit this sort of euphoria. Sorry, I'm just going to talk about myself for a second. I really am like an artistic mind. Like I get it. I hit kind of a euphoria for working on this project, and then like it's kind of an emotional exhaustion. So you end up like kind of drinking for 4 days in a row coming out of that, and then you go, okay, well, no, you're 40, and you're not gonna like. I lift every day to try to create the same sort of stability, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of self-medicating, I addict myself. I addict myself to things that are positive, right?
Right.
Like you're better off being addicted to yoga. Right? Or even like talking spiritual shit on social media. If that's what it takes, right? Like that's better for you than looking at porn. Even though it's essentially the same thing, it's sort of the brighter side of that part of the ego and the brain. So,
right. You're playing on a similar mechanism. And so
yeah, no, I do think you should frame everything in terms of economics when it comes to people interacting with each other. I think that's like, I mean, I know that that's not the a la mode. Like I know that we're supposed to frame things in terms of like this sort of moral narcissism, of like, oh, or even a social, or not social construction, it's social constructionism essentially, right? Where everything is a product of environment. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's true, but also I mean, the first act of free will is to like admit that you have free will, and or if you don't think that entirely, you might as well just behave as though you do have will, because that's the only option you have anyway. It's like to affect change inside of the sphere of your life. If you end up, like I said, but the rhetoric of politics is always about getting people that are disconnected from themselves and what will actually make them happy or even healthy, and putting them into unions of force that they can use against other people that have shit that they can take.
Okay, so that ties back into what I was talking about with comparing things economically in terms of a healthcare perspective, where people, as you said, there are people that are investing in yoga, there are people that are investing in exercising, and that improves their long-term health potential. And then there are also people that are investing, same mechanism, but they're investing in things that over time erode their longevity and their health. And that's one of the issues that I have with a healthcare system. And honestly, I've reaped the benefits of universal healthcare, so I can't talk a lot of shit about it. I've had 2 Achilles repaired.
It's almost like you have to be like a secret capitalist, even though I don't like that term. It's like if you have this idea of like a rational like look at marketplace, and you think in terms of free market, you have to pretend like there's always a caveat at the beginning. It's like, oh, well, I know there's outliers and there's certain circumstances, and you know what I mean? It's like, maybe it used to be the other way around is why. And like, there's a lot of atrocities or whatever, a lot of grievance. But we have definitely been conditioned to be shy about thinking these sort of like this logocentric ideas where like, maybe you should take care of yourself. It's like, well, some people can't. Some people have this or whatever. And I'm like, well, those people, then we can talk about those people. But you You specifically, I know, can get into better shape. And it's like, you know, anyway, you're saying it's just funny because like you have to, you're constantly, not you, but like all of us are constantly
Absolutely.
self-censoring.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
capitalism is it's an absolute horrible form of economy. It's terrible. It's full of
well,
exploitation,
it's,
but
yeah, it's
it's the best that
children,
we
it's
have.
children in factories, right?
It's the best that we've
It's,
found so far.
well, the term reduces a complex system of voluntary action down to its most static and simple component, capital. Like we don't have capitalism because we have fiat currency that they print into existence, that they loan into existence. What we have is debt slavery that central banks like dominate the globe with the American army over. Do you know what I mean? Like this is not a free market or capitalism. You need capital for that, and no one has any because all of our currency is debt based. They printed like half of the currency, American currency that ever existed in the last 18 months.
Yeah, that's
Like,
horrifying. I
like
don't.
yeah, it's going to be the $1 trillion note, and then the currency will be like bullets and then gold, ideally. But I feel like we've got a shot at changing the path this time because I'm not really digging this particular revolutionary cycle.
Yeah, I think debt based debt based is an interesting term that I like. I've always thought of it as more of a promise. Money is a promise. If I'm going to do this thing and it's really hard for me to go to the market and trade my cow, like I want that piece of paper, but he
Yeah,
wants a chicken and I have a cow.
yeah, that's
And
currency. It's just
it's
a
right,
chip.
and that's what money has essentially become, as a promise that, well, if I sell my cow, you're giving me this piece of paper, and when I get that piece of paper, then that's a promise that this is going to be worth my cow tomorrow.
Yeah, depending on no, it's going to be worth what it is. It's going to be worth a static value of something scarce. So gold works because there's only so much of it.
Right.
And then the amount of cows, the price of the cow can fluctuate based on how many cows there are.
Right, but that's the idea with money, is that it's not fluctuating. So it
No, it's
is it
supposed
is
to be
in a way
static, and
it's
it's
right.
yeah. So if you want to control a people, nefariously from the shadows, you control the means of expression and the means of exchange. Mostly the means of exchange. The means of expression, the media side, is more like a magic or sorcery that fools people into, or like distracts people from seeing um, the economics of the situation, how they're being ruled. Which is like, I just don't think it's an accident that we've been told to be shy about talking about economics from a sort of more, I don't know, right wing or libertarian perspective, from a free market perspective.
Well,
Like,
from a strictly economical perspective.
yeah, like just looking because oh, that reduces people down to nuts and bolts. I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure the communists do that too.
Yeah.
Pretty sure they think that you can interchange human beings into any job. Like you kind of have to, and McDonald's can do that, because they
Yeah.
reduce the job down to like one or two buttons.
Hmm.
And it's like that would be very liberating, but you need to have some sort of outlet outside of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I hijacked you because you were talking about healthcare, and I just noticed that like I do the same thing, like
Hmm.
where we have to be outwardly extrovertedly shy about these ideas because we don't want to have to like they're like look, these are the self-flagellation marks on my back for being an evil like straight male capitalist living in the first world reaping all the benefits of all this stuff. But it's like, well, i didn't I didn't consent to being born here or participating in a healthcare system. you know I criticize it because theoretically it can't function forever. Like if we're spending half of our money on healthcare, half of our resources are going into healthcare, we've not incentivized the right behavior.
That's a really good point. I think that's the central mode that I was getting at. I do agree that people proclaim their privilege before making statements contrary to the privileges that they have reaped, which is interesting that you point that out. I do appreciate that. Thanks. Um, but yeah, that's the crux of what I'm getting at is lots of, I'm not even sure what the crux of what I'm getting at is. It's definitely in some form a critique of what we're doing, because if we promote unhealthy behaviors and dissuade people from making healthy decisions based on personal responsibility and individual autonomy, then we just get into this world where, and that's the way that I see one of the benefits of the US economy is that, or the US healthcare system is that, well, you can invest in yourself, and that's going to make it less likely that you actually need healthcare. And obviously there are extraneous circumstances, but and then that also, I think that also ties into a social perspective where people that are generally less well off also don't have the opportunity to take care of themselves and invest in themselves in the way that would make them the most healthy. So then you
Yeah,
have groups of people that are I'm not going to use the term oppressed because I hate it, but you have people that are not able to, or not immediately able to thrive in the economy, and because of that they're unable to invest in themselves, and those would be the people
well,
that would require the most help, actually.
yeah, they lack opportunity, I suppose, but that is a
Mm-hmm.
form of oppression because that lack of opportunity has been um, articulated or realized, manifested by collective force, the violence of government.
Yeah.
Like I can't just open up a lemonade stand, and that's not my community stopping me from doing it. It's the law, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then you look at the lockdowns. I mean, that's a really great example because it would have impacted uh, vulnerable communities. That's better than oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
Vulnerable communities more than anybody else. You know, and then the media is telling them to burn down the Targets in their neighborhood. I'm like, okay, well, like those are probably owned by like black owners. Like the Wendy's you burned down is probably owned by a black guy. Like, what are you doing? Why is the media? Anyway, but yeah, if you notice, I'm not just talking about franchises because they've replaced everything, right? And so the only people that can compete in such a regulated market are massive corporations because they're the only ones that can move and implement new policy because they have access to not capital, not like coffers of gold where they can actually put this money out, but they have access to like finance. They have access to credit, which is what our system runs on. So it's more about like, yeah, like the credibility and stuff. And the opportunities would result in people being able to just work or innovate or create something and have a place to be able to do that. That would liberate a lot of, I mean, that's like essentially why drug crime and the whole propaganda against drugs was such a useful thing, right? Because like, I mean, that's go to McDonald's and work there or sell drugs at a 300% markup. Or not even three. Yeah. Oh, yeah. 300%, like times three at that level, the street level, you're getting like kind of a 3-to-1. So that's like, I mean, that's a good job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and those are the people that are creating opportunities for themselves, and the state is running direct interference. Now, ironically enough, the price of drugs wouldn't be 3-to-1, even at that level. It's like whatever 1,000-to-1 if you're producing it. It wouldn't be 3-to-1 without the intervention of the government in the first place, making it illegal and therefore scarce. And it's also going to attract the worst possible people are going to be attracted. The most violent people are going to be involved in that because it's so lucrative, and also that because it has to self-regulate.
Mm-hmm.
Like the authority within drug sales, contraband of any kind, you can't go to the police, so it makes its own rules.
Yeah.
And because there's enough territory being fought over, that the violence is going to be a lot. The violence of our culture, like the borders of our stuff, is like pushed right out to proxy wars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then because we've agreed that the cops get to be the only ones that have the right to beat people up and shoot them and stuff. So, yeah. Anyway, sorry, we went off on a fucking tangent again. Basically, the opportunities in a community would be what liberate people from evil capitalism. It isn't oppression from, I mean, it is to an extent now because of like how far we've gone on this path of this sort of corporatocracy, where the the unionized force of government being implemented, this monopoly of violence, has been used only to enforce the growth and consolidation of capital wealth, or not capital, but credit, debt-based wealth in these corporations. So it's like at this point they're buying up everybody's houses. Like there's no opportunity. Not even the middle class has been completely destroyed, and the working class has no options. So now we can just work. That's the only option. And yeah, that's going to affect vulnerable communities more, because like when we're pushing people to that level of poverty, like, you know, people are going to form into gangs. They're going to, you know, they're going to hire their friends, and their friends are going to likely have the same skin color as them until the system grows to start incorporating other people. And you get the odd, you know, multicultural group of friends, but like for the most part, like your family might look like the next, you know, so it's going to appear on the surface to be racist, is I guess my point. Mm-hmm. When it's just the natural, like, yeah, and if there's less of somebody in this community and they've got less money to start off when this lockdown happens, it's just going to exacerbate that. But I mean, they're 100% right. It's definitely affecting minorities. It's more oppressive to minorities than to the majorities.